The Super Bowl is over. It is officially baseball draft season. I've got Ariel Cohen joining me today on the RotoWire Fantasy Baseball Podcast. Excited to talk about all sorts of baseball draft prep and tips and things to get ready for this baseball season. All coming up next on the RotoWire Fantasy Baseball Podcast. Hey, everybody. Welcome to the RotoWire Fantasy Baseball Podcast, brought to you by the good folks over at Fantrax and Edge Boost. I'm Jeff Erickson here with Ariel Cohen. You know Ariel Cohen. He's from the ATC Projections. Catch him everywhere on Twitter, everywhere on the internet. He's doing great work. Ariel, quickly, tell everybody where they can find your work, and then we'll launch into this, our topics for the day.
Yeah, well, ATC Projections are on a number of sites, including Fangraphs, Rotoballer, and RotoWire. So
yes,
check them out there. My written work is over at Fangraphs and at Rotoballer, and you can catch the Beat the Shift podcast, just nominated for an FSWA Podcast Award. Congrats to yours as well, RotoWire as well, nominated.
Yeah, and we're thrilled to be there, and well deserving for you. Congratulations.
Thank you.
You guys, you do great work. All the stuff that you do at your outlets is great. I love having you on. I love you being stepping in for my good friend Scott Genstad tonight. We're going to get Scott back soon. Excited about that, but we're in great hands right now with you. Let's just jump right into it. I'm framing this as, okay, Super Bowl's over. For a lot of people, it's boom. It's baseball draft prep time. How do you, I know you start a lot earlier than most, but when you're like, okay, it's baseball draft prep time, what's like Ariel's first step?
Well, my first step is the ATC projections. I let the projections guide me on where I should spend my time in researching players, right? I don't have time to research every single player in the universe. I've got a job and I've got my, things to do.
Yep.
But
family, all that. Yep.
Yeah, but what I'm using ATC projections to bubble up to the top the players that have a chance at being undervalued or profitable, right? So of course I'm doing all the ATC projections, and it takes a couple weeks to assemble and to verify and blah blah blah. But once I get that, I look at what the projections show. I evaluate them. I get a dollar amount if you want to put it in auction dollar format or even in rank form, just what the rank suggests by ATC. And I compare it to the market values. I compare it to NFBC ADP, anything I can get my hands on to see what other people are paying. And then I see which players are coming up as a bargain according to my projections. Now, I may not believe that those players are really fantastic. Maybe there's something wrong with projections. Maybe there's a blind spot. Maybe I don't believe in them. Whatever it may be. Most of the time, by the way, I do believe. But I first get those names, and then I do my research. Sometimes it's just about players that I already knew about that, yep, they're there again. And sometimes, surprise, I never believed in that guy. Let's take a look. And then I do my deep dives. Then I take a look. What did he do last year? What skills did he improve on? Was he lucky? Was he unlucky last year? Did the team context change? Is he getting more playing time? And once you do the deep dives, you see what you believe. And now you're compiling a bunch of players who they're going to be pretty profitable or have a chance to be pretty profitable according to projections, and I believe them. Anybody who comes up as a terrible overpay according to ATC projections, I don't even look at. I'm not going to spend my time on them because, they're just so far away. But I start my process with the most profitable, and I work my way downwards.
All right. I'm going to go back a little bit here because we're starting with your ATC projections. When do you get started on ATC projections?
So I first start in December. I theoretically I could start the day that the season ends, but I take a little bit of a break. I think most people need a break.
Yes.
I do what's called my ATC regressions, and what ATC looks at other projections and it sees the best way to weight them. And every passing year, we can see some projections maybe got better in homers or got better in stolen bases or pitcher strikeouts, and it gobbles up all of the new data from the past year, comparing what they projected versus what actually happened. And then it moves my equations for just ever so slightly for what I should be weighting projections for next year. So that takes a long time, because when you're running regressions, some of these take a long time, and then you're manually analyzing them. I do a nice mathematical approach. So that takes a couple weeks in December, and I get done roughly around New Year's Day. Then on New Year's Day, I start building, I start doing my data matching. Luis Garcia, let's just say, gives me a lot of trouble. There's 4 of them, including 3 in the major leagues. And I'm loading up my projections and doing my matching. And after a couple weeks of just verifying that, okay, I've classified this guy as an injury comeback, and this guy as a rookie, and this guy as just a general, and I have different equations for different types of players, and then I run all of them, and then the final cut comes 3rd week in January, when I do my final review to make sure there's no errors or anomalies or some crazy things, and then boom, and then ATC drops right after Martin Luther King Jr. Day.
How far back does the data go for ATC?
Well, theoretically, I've been doing them since about 2011, although I pretty much don't use any data back then. I'd say about 3 to 5 years is what you want to look at in terms of fitting my curve. So the 6th year will drop off, and then the 5th year comes on, that kind of thing.
Yeah, and I start with a 3-year weighted average. And we've been through so many big changes lately that our data set has been kind of compromised. And that's one of the things I've found that I've really struggled with. Whether it's the 2020 COVID season or 2019 Happy Fun Ball, or the change from the shift ban, all these things change our data set, and we can account for it, but it's hard to it's already an imprecise method to begin with. And I'm not saying your method. I'm just saying using previous year's data period is already somewhat imprecise. It's a corrupter, if you will.
Yeah, no, I mean, somebody once said science is stupid because it assumes that what happened yesterday is going to happen tomorrow. But in baseball, that's not true. I mean, there could be, who knows what baseball's doing with the balls. They can juice them up. They can slap on, no sticky stuff. They can widen the bases. They can encourage things. Teams can value different things. Like, the baseball environment is constantly changing. If there's small changes, then we can incorporate that and we can adjust very easily, but we can't really see what's going on. I mean, once they change the bases and put the only 3 disengagements rule and all that, I mean, it changed so dramatically.
Yeah.
And the first year, you don't tell me that everyone got it right. I mean, maybe everyone directionally knew that there were more stolen bases. Nobody could really predict exactly what it is. And then you have, of course, ballpark changes. I mean, we got a couple new ones coming up. The Athletics are moving to Sacramento. Tampa is moving to Steinbrenner Field.
Right.
We think we have an idea of how it's going to play, but we don't know until we actually see what's going on. So that's the problem with studying the past, is that it's indicative of the future most of the time, but a lot of times you just can't predict it.
Yeah, exactly. And you can, like you said, directionally you can do it. The degree, the preciseness of it is just gone at times. And, it turns out the shift ban, I know Uncle Ted is talking about in the chat here about that. It really does help left-handed pull hitters a lot. Corey Seager is the shining example, but you could go back. Mark Teixeira's career ended prematurely because he couldn't beat the shift. He was one of those guys that just really got hurt by that. And it took us a while to kind of adjust that as teams were shifting more and more effectively and more efficiently. Well, that's going to have a bigger impact on our batting averages. And that's one of the many main changes. Another big change is the change in velocity. Every year velocities goes up, Ks are going up, batting averages are going down.
Injuries go up.
And we had more pitcher injuries last year than ever. Is some team going to, and it seems like the only adjustment teams make is to have their pitchers pitch less. Nobody is saying, well, maybe you shouldn't, throw so hard, because you know why? Because there's a huge correlation between velocity and success when they are on the mound, and to them, it's worth the trade-off.
Yeah, and those are macro changes that we're talking about here.
Yeah.
But there's micro changes at the player level. I mean,
Yes.
somebody can change their pitch mix.
Mhm.
Somebody can change their arm angle. Like Sean Manaea changed his arm angle last year, and boom, he was a different pitcher, right? You can
Yep.
have somebody has a batting stance change. Somebody could have been unhealthy for the whole season, or maybe like Freddie Freeman, worried about his son all year. So there are a lot of things that you just don't know. And projections don't account for them correctly. When
Nor
you
could they, nor should they.
right.
I mean, the human element is human for a reason. I mean, not everybody behaves the same way, the same stimuli, and it's kind of creepy to get into everybody's business about that too. I mean, yes, we're thirsty for information. We all want that nugget, and we want to say, "Oh yeah, this is definitely why this happened." No, it's a factor in why something happened more often than not, and to pretend to think that we know it's not. It's pretending.
No, you don't know. But when you use projections or when you look at them, and by the way, projections are the best thing. You can come up with if someone comes up with their own version of what they project, and I like this guy, I don't like this guy is this. Projections will get it right in the long term. Yes, you might have a better idea than projection for most people, but projections in general will get right. But if you understand where the blind spots are in projections and why a certain projection for a player may not work because they were injured, missing data, they have a different change in their stance, whatever,
Mhm.
then you should be using projections and your specific knowledge on top of them. And that's really where the money gets paid there.
Do you ever have an outlier in your projections? Like, ATC says this and you even think, "Oh, I'm high on this guy. I really like this guy, but man, the market's so far behind. Maybe I should tamper this down a little bit." And then it turns out that you're right.
Well, the thing about ATC is that ATC doesn't produce many outliers, or if it does, it mutes things because ATC is looking at other projections who do have outliers, and
Mhm.
it takes only a partial bit of them, right? If you only have 2 outliers out there, ATC will mute that. So I never get these ginormous outliers. You very often you can get somebody who's 7 rounds ahead, but if ATC is showing that a player is being picked $7, $10 more than cheaper than they should be, it's a pretty good thought that this guy is going to be good. If all the smart projections are saying so and the market is way off, that's generally a good sign. So when ATC has an outlier, I'm really trusting it.
Okay, very good. So who's that outlier so far this draft season?
Well, there's no outlier, as we said, but there are obviously undervalued players. Um, Taylor Ward is a good example of an undervalued player. He's going, I don't know, about $7, $8, much cheaper than he should. You can get him at the ends of drafts, but he's worth oodles more, and he's done this before. Partially, he had an injured season. He got hit by a ball, I think, and you know, people are just seeing the holes in the numbers, but they aren't getting the full picture of, wait a minute, his skills are there. It recovered. It's going to recover fully, right? That was just a fluke. Projections are asserting it. He's one guy. I think a guy like Ryan McMahon. I love when projections do the boring guys. Ryan
Mhm.
McMahon hits 20 homers every year. 20 homers this year, 20 homers last year, 20 homers the year before. Projections, everyone says 20, but the market is paying for much less than that. Hello, he's going to have 20 homers. Now, he's not thrilling. He doesn't have upside. So if you're interested in the high upside player in the late rounds, he's not the guy. But it's just so much value. Whenever you're drafting, it's not just looking at the projections, the numbers. You have to understand your situation. If you're
Right.
in a deeper league, you're not looking so much for upside. You're looking for value. If you're in a shallow league with your last picks, then you're looking for the upside. So a player like Ryan McMahon, he's going to be someone that I target in a deeper league, a 15-team or mono league, but in a 10-team mixed, no thank you. I'll take my dart on the shiny new toy who's somewhere at the bottom.
Yeah. That makes perfect sense. Like Chris Davis with the K is going to hit 247 and he's going to hit 247 and then he's
Yeah.
going to hit 247 again. But I love certain repeatable guys like that. And McMahon definitely is in that category for sure. I always find it's interesting when I get get that one player that, or maybe not just one player, but a series of players. Maybe there's a category of players like you suggested, the boring types. Scott Pianowski calls them the Raul Ibanez all-stars, that consistently get underrated because they're old and boring.
Yeah. And what I'll say also is, if you find a group of players in a year, let's say a bunch of third basemen, let's add Alec Bohm, let's add Andrew Vaughn, another couple of guys, same thing, that they're not thrilling, but they're a bargain and they're the same position. I call that a hot spot. Oh my God, you can get a player for $5 that projections say is $15, and there's 5 of them. By the way, you're probably going to get one of them. If there's some Alec Bohm fan in the house, you may not get Alec Bohm. If there's some Andrew Vaughn fan, okay, in a draft or auction, you may not get him. But when there's 4 players who have that same kind of boring attitude, that's $10 projected more than what they're going to the market, there's like a 95% chance that you're going to walk away with one of them. When I'm planning my draft, I pencil in that dollar amount. I'm getting one of these corner infielders right here. And to me, that's actually how you prepare your draft. You find the hot spots of where pockets of similarly categorized players or similar stats maybe and similar market price, and you go there. When you're drafting up top and you want to pick, should I pick the shortstop or should I pick the corner infielder? Well, if you knew that the pocket of value is corner infield down in around number 17, well, then I would take the shortstop up top and not take the corner because I'll get that corner later. So preparing the draft, I do it bottom up, right? I'm looking for what the pockets are at the bottom, and that gives me the decisions of what to get up top because I know I'm going to get my values in those spots down.
I love talking about bottom up, drafting bottom up. I think that's super important there. And you can apply it to either auctions or snake drafts for that matter.
Yes. That's right. That's right. That's the way to do it. A lot of people go through the first 2 rounds and say, oh, I want to get this guy and this guy, so I'm going to pick 14th so I can get Lindor and this guy. To me, that's not the way to do it. That just tells you 2 players up top. By the way, every player up top is a superstar.
Right.
You're not going to people. The most common question I get this offseason is people ask me, hey, Ariel, should I get Bobby Witt or Aaron Judge? And my answer is, if you're just looking at those 2 players in a vacuum, they're both awesome for slightly different reasons, right? It's not about that. It's take a look what you need the rest of the draft. What is your league value later on? And that will tell you which one of those 2 up top you should buy.
Absolutely. We are talking with Ariel Cohen. You can read him, follow him on Twitter at ATCNY, read him on Fangraphs and Rotoballer, of course. Check out the ATC projections over at RotoWire as well. They are listed there. We're going to talk about the valuation process. We're going to talk about positions and a lot more. But first, quick note from our friends over at Fantrax. Fantrax is the most customizable fantasy platform in the industry, offering the greatest fantasy experience for your dynasty, keeper, redraft, and best ball leagues. Coming from another service, Fantrax makes it easy. Fantrax can import any of your current leagues and customize if needed. Fantrax offers the most in-depth player pool in the industry, including minor league players. Do you need a customizable commissioner service for your fantasy league? Fantrax offers more customization than any other platform. Waivers, categories, scoring system, schedule. Fantrax offers custom solutions for all that and more, and it's all free. Sign up for free today and be entered to win an official MLB signed jersey from Vladimir Guerrero Jr. Simply go to fantrax.com/rotowire and sign up today. That's fantrax.com/rotowire. Fantrax, the home of fantasy sports. I'm here with Ariel Cohen. Ariel, I wanted you to talk about the valuation. You said that, you come up with the projections first. How do you do it? How do you then convert those into rankings and or dollar values?
So if we're talking about points, a points league, it's really simple. You literally take the number of points per, if Homer's worth 4, well, if somebody's projected for 20 homers, that's 80 points, right? You add up all of the things and that gets your points. And your rankings are pretty much the points other than a replacement level by position. So catchers, catchers are all going to get lower points than some of the other positions, but they need to be bumped up because when you buy a catcher, you're not buying the catcher stats. You're buying the privilege of not buying the number 30 catcher or whatever your bottom catcher is. So if you subtract out those marginal stats of whoever is at the bottom and the catcher is really low, you'll see that the catchers get bumped up. But points are really, really easy because you're literally just calculating the points. The problem comes up in rotisserie is that you have to determine how to equate all the different categories. How much is a homer worth as much as a stolen base,
Right.
or as your batting average, or is it worth as much as a point of whip, or a point of ERA, or a strikeout? Right? You have to have a way of equating. There's a number of methods that people use. Some use the percentage value method. A lot of people that I know use the standings gain points. I use the Z-score method. And the Z-score method, the very gist of it is you're converting every single stat for every single player into a standard normal score, meaning you take the average of all the player pool and you're now calculating how many standard deviations above or below average you are. If you're +2 for a certain category, that means you're 2 standard deviations above. And if you're 2 standard deviations above for runs, then you're 2 standard deviations above for homers. You equate what that 2 standard deviations are, and that's how you would equate them. You then add up your Z-scores for every single category, and voila, that's your total rank, and you make rankings based on that. Batting average and rate stats are a little bit different because you're not just adding up the batting average. Some batting average are affected more than others. Like if I told you that this guy is going to bat 400 and this guy is going to bat 280, which is better? Well, it depends how many at bats you have.
Right.
If I only have 5 at bats, your 400 player doesn't do much for you as much as your 280 who has 700 at bats, right? So you sort of have to convert using at bats and hits. And I have some formulas to do that. But all said and done, the premise is that you're equating categories by standard deviations. The reason why I like that better is because it's forward looking. You're using the projections itself to get the standard deviations. People who are using SGPs, you're looking at what happened last year and how much you can gain in each category, but by what happened last year. And as we said at the top of the show, that means that whatever happened last year will exactly happen next year. That's not exactly true, right?
Right.
So Z-scores are a way of doing it.
And SGPs, it's interesting because I have used all of them in the past. I still kind of mostly use them still, but I realize they're not perfect. And we're trying to always estimate like what the category, like what it's going to be to gain a point in the standings for each category. And it's like anything else. It's a guess. It's an educated guess, over years of experience, but it's not perfect. It's definitely not perfect. The league, and the worst part is like, it's one thing trying to evaluate player performance. Another thing, like, oh, the league's just going to mess with the ball this year and we're going to have something completely different there. And, oh, well, that means all of a sudden those theoretical 210 homers I had aren't as good as I thought they were, or same thing with the stolen bases. And we've seen like what a massive leap in stolen bases we've had the last 2 years.
Oh, yeah. Now, I agree that if you're somehow, whatever happened last year will exactly come up for next year, sure, FGPs would work. But that's assuming you're in the exact same league with the same players as well.
Right.
If you're playing in another league that's different audience, different team, it's impossible. So the Z-score method is a little bit forward-looking. And what if you're in a different format entirely? You're now playing in a mono league instead. Z-scores can do the same thing. It'll be a standard deviation, but it'll be a different standard deviation. So it's way more translatable for other formats. And by the way, if you rig the formulas, you can actually do Z-score. You can actually do your FGPs in your Z-scores if you wanted. So it's just way more flexible, and that's why I do them.
So I find that, there's 2 elements to the leagues, though. There's the player evaluation point, and then there's the gaming aspect of it there. Coming up with your draft strategy or auction strategy, as it may be. It may change every year. It's not just, okay, spotting this bargain and taking it. Because first of all, if you're playing in a really sharp league, those values aren't going to be as prevalent. And B, I think, people can see how you're building your roster. They can try to find a way to beat it. When we were during the dark days of COVID and there were no sports going on, we did a lot of retro drafts, and we really found the emphasis on strategy was so important there. So for you coming up with your draft strategy, what are you looking for from the gaming side of things?
Yeah, it's all about seeing how the player pool is functioning, and that's going to be different every single year. So, for example, for this year in the middle infield, if you look at players that are valued at between $13 and $17, like that's literally a $4 range, I count 14 different middle infielders in that range. Now, that tells me that, wow, I've got so many choices in that mid range. It's got to be that somebody is going to be undervalued there, or it doesn't really matter who I take. I'll get somebody in that range. So because there's so many there, I don't have to spend time up top getting a shortstop. Bobby Witt is a fantastic player, but I can get a shortstop somewhere in that range instead. I can get an Ozzy Albies in that range. I can get a Bo Bichette, Jeremy Pena, Luis Garcia, Xavier Edwards, or any one of those that are roughly in that area. And I'll probably get them a couple of rounds even better than that because there's such a cluster. So I've identified the middle infield exactly in the teens range as a cluster. I know that I'm not going to get shortstops and middle and second baseman below that. I'm not going to get them above that. I'm going to get them there. That tells me how to game it because I'm looking for clusters. Whereas when you're in the outfield has, well, it's got a super elite Aaron Judge at the top, and then it's got just a couple of elite options: Soto, Alvarez, Tucker, Tatis, Carroll, etc. And then there's a gap. Well, that tells me that that's pretty unique to have that up top. I want to get a top outfielder this year. If I'm drafting my first couple of rounds, I don't want to leave without an outfielder, and I'm going to prioritize over the other position. So it's very important to look at your player pool, look how the values are constructed in each category, and that will tell you where you should buy. Now, obviously, this is a plan. Things happen. You have to shift to other tactics if things go wrong in a draft, but you should always come prepared to know where the most likely point is and where the pivots are.
Yep. As Mike Tyson has often said, and we've often quoted, everybody has a plan until they get punched in the mouth. So,
Yeah.
it can change on the fly. The thing that can be toughest for me is the scarce category. Well, I would say scarce saves and stolen bases, putting a value on that because the got players that provide those two particular categories often have a limited impact in other categories, but yet we need those categories. So putting the proper value on closers, even though they're, what they do, isn't necessarily going to be worth $20, for instance. We still may have to draft them at a $20 price if we want them.
Yeah, so let's talk about those separately because I think they're different elements.
Yes.
I don't think that stolen bases are scarce anymore. In fact, I think
Agreed.
that the homers and RBIs are way more scarce. And when I say they're scarce, I'm looking at the waiver wire, right? If you look at your active pool and then you look at the hitters, the next 50 hitters below that, they're devoid of runs and RBIs and homers. But there are a lot of people, that David Hamilton's underneath, right,
Mm-hmm.
who will get you
Xavier
steals.
Edwards, who you mentioned just
Xavier
a minute ago.
Edwards.
Yep.
Yeah, there are some low value guys in the waiver wire. So I know that if I have a guy hurt, I'm going to be able to fill somebody in. I know that I can grab steals from there. I can't get runs and RBIs. I can't get homers. So to me, the what's devoid is actually the power. If I'm looking to strengthen any category on the offense right now, it's power. It's not steals. Very different from 4 years ago where you're always scared. Oh my God, I got to get steals. It's not true anymore. Now, saves is scarce the same way it always is. There's always a finite number, and it's even worse these days because of the closer committees, right? What's going to happen for the LA Dodgers? Are they going to, is everybody literally going to get 10 saves, right? It could happen. Tampa Bay Rays, every year nobody ends up with more than 15, and there's 9 pitchers plus the ball boy who gets a save, right? So that is a little bit different way to navigate, and to me it's a matter of market pricing and just being better than the market. If everybody is paying 2 rounds over where you theoretically think that they should be, you got to pay it. But I wouldn't pay the full value. I would pay a little bit less, right? If everyone's jumping 2 rounds, jump just 1 round and get your guy there, things like that.
It's interesting you mentioned the Dodgers. So there was actually a note that came out today. Dave Roberts said today that Tanner Scott will see the bulk of the save chances to begin the season in a Jim Bowden article in The Athletic. Now, when Brandon Gomes signed him in January, he talking about Scott, he said that he won't be a set closer, but I think Roberts envisions Scott as the first among equals is the way I see it. And to be honest, I don't fully trust Dave Roberts when it comes to closers anyhow. So I'm not going to really go too crazy on that news.
Yeah, the only thing I'll say though is that have you ever heard of a $72 million relief pitcher
No.
that really was not the save guy?
Right.
No.
And yeah, you look at his contract and you look at Kirby Yates's contract. Yeah. And you've got
I'm buying all of Tanner Scott this year because if I get that discount because people aren't sure, $72 million, who's paid more? Is Hader and Diaz are the only two paid more than him? I mean, come on. He's going to get, maybe he won't get all the save chances, but remember, the Dodgers had like 50 saves last year. He can get 2/3 of the save chances, and that's 35 saves. So I'm good with it.
Yeah. So to your point, I'm just looking up NFBC ADP since February 1st. Tanner Scott's now sitting at 164. Still, that's and the min price is 126. That's pretty affordable.
I've bought him in every league so far this offseason.
Have you really? Nice. How many have you done so far, by the way?
I'm in a DC, a 50s, in the NFBC, and I've done an online auction championship. So 3 so far.
Okay. Yeah, I'm like at 4, one ongoing right now. But yeah, and it's about to pick up in a big hurry. Labor's coming up, home leagues, more NFBC leagues. It's great.
I love it.
Yeah, looking forward to it too. It should be a lot of fun. So I thought it was interesting. We had some clarity there. I think your price on Scott's going to go up now.
Yes. And by the way, that's one advantage to drafting early in the offseason.
Absolutely.
That you can get the bigger bargains. When everyone says, oh, no, I want to draft later because things are more set. True, but then your bigger bargains disappear.
Yeah, but the flip side is I did a DC where I had Lucas Urseg, and here comes down Carlos Estevez, and it's like, we had these late changes. It's interesting. We had some like late January changes in the closer jobs. We saw Jeff Hoffman go to the Jays. That's another one I like a lot.
Yeah,
because they also came out and said he will close. You always like it when you get that affirmative comment there. I don't mind I still like Urseg. I still like Porter Hodge as pitchers, but yeah, it's going to be tougher. I'm more skeptical of Presley in Chicago than I am of Estevez in Kansas City, though. I think I'd go after Hodge a little bit more than Urseg now.
Urseg looked great last year. I don't know. I stick a little bit with Urseg. If you have drafted him because you have, I wouldn't drop him so much
I'm not
yet.
going to. Yeah, no. Yeah. But at the same token, I just feel like I distrust Presley more is more my point. I like Urseg's skills, talents a lot. Just a question of how that's going to play out there. But who knows? We'll see how that one plays out. We're going to talk Mets here in a sec, but first, quick note from our other sponsor, Edge Boost. Have you ever had your debit card declined or had to call your bank at 3 a.m. in Vegas? Edge Boost is the first consumer-facing online bank dedicated to the gaming industry. There are numerous benefits to using Edge Boost. $250,000 per day in debit deposits, unlimited withdrawals, cash back on sports betting, DFS, and sweeps, 100% approval for all gaming activity, financial segmentation for discretion and responsible gaming, compatible today for prediction markets, iCasino, DFS, sports betting, lottery, brick and mortar casinos, horse racing, and sweeps. No transaction reviews or account freezes. Visit edgeboost.bet today and use promo code ROTOPOD. That's promo code ROTOPOD. Thank you, Edge Boost, for your sponsorship of the RotoWire MLB podcast. We are also on the BlueWire network. All right. Thank you, BlueWire, for hosting us as always. I'm with Ariel Cohen. Check him out on Twitter at ATCNY. NY. Hey, that means we're going to talk a little Mets right now. You're wearing the Mets jersey. I appreciate that. On brand. Let's talk. I mean, I think by and large, it has been a successful offseason for your Mets.
Well, when you get the best player in the offseason in the market, how can you say no? I don't. As a Mets fan, I'm a little jaded, and things tend to blow up when you have too much expectation. So I want to be a little bit cautiously optimistic. But yeah, our offense is the same. Plus, we've added Juan Soto. Our pitching staff is pretty much there, other than Severino. But we've gotten a couple of guys and a healthy Kodai Senga. So on paper, it looks like a better team than last year, and we had a wild ride last year. So I'm pretty optimistic.
Yeah, it should be. I mean, it's nice. The interesting thing for me is there's a couple of interesting transactions. We'll talk about all of them kind of individually, but let's start in the rotation. Um, I, how many innings is Clay Holmes going to pitch?
Yeah, that's the toughest one to check out because, to be honest, we don't know how he's going to respond from being a reliever going to being a starter. Last year he pitched 63 innings. Can he get up to 150? Probably not. ATC has him projected at 130. I guess I think that's about a good comp. I think I'm good with ATC's number of 130.
I'm at
Yeah,
126. I'm right there with you.
yeah, I think so. I think the Mets are going the route of not relying on an ace. That's why the Mets really didn't make a big splash. I mean, they got Sean Manaea, who was one of their own from last year,
Hmm.
but they're playing the quantity and not quality game. As I count, I think the Mets have 8 different starters that they can throw in.
Yep.
At the bottom, they signed Griffin Canning. They still have Paul Blackburn. They've got Tyler McGill, and then they have the 5 regular starters that they have. And they're just hoping things come up. Now, last year, it all came up roses. Severino was amazing. Manaea was incredible. And Jose Quintana held out. Can that happen again? And can we find upside with Montas and Holmes? I'm hoping. But, if one of them goes well, then you still have a success because we still have we have greater protection in case of injury or bad performance because we do have other starters. And of course, at the middle of the season, if things are dire and it's going well, you can always trade from the farm and trade for a reliable starter. But it's not. But David Stearns doesn't see it as doing that from the start the right play. Go in the cheap. See what you have, quantity over quality, and if you have to make a move in the middle of the season, then you make the move.
Yeah, if you look at like expected ERA stats, Frankie Montas, for instance, pitched way better than the end results suggest. And he was much better in the second half than he was over the first. And that kind of follows from a guy coming back from a major injury that he would get better over time, that it would be choppier at first, especially pitching in Cincinnati.
Yeah, well, Montas better than me.
Barely.
Yeah,
Barely. I had a half a season of him.
yeah. It's one of these reclamation projects, sort of, right? He didn't pitch much. I think he had like 1 inning just like 2 years ago. Last year, he had a 4.84 ERA, 1.37 WHIP. We're hoping that the Mets staff with Jeremy Hefner can turn that around and use his positive stuff. He showed a 23% strikeout rate, which is pretty good. If he cuts down on some walks and shows some of the stuff he showed earlier in his career, I mean, this could be at least a number 3 starter, and you're paying him like a number 4 or 5 starter. So again, it's the upside play for these reclamation projects, which is the David Stearns way to go. And I mean, it worked last year, and it's worked in Milwaukee when he's done it. So hopefully he'll continue.
Last year, we saw just Edwin Diaz only had 20 saves. Pitt, had some ups and downs over the course of the season. He's back installed as the closer this year. What's your level of confidence in him?
I think Edwin Diaz is all about confidence, and you saw a glimpse of that in the end in the playoffs in the Phillies series when he struggled. He got a couple of runners on base, and then they just had a chat with the catcher, and Alvarez said, they can't hit you. Like the conversation was, they can't hit you. Just throw your stuff. And when he had that confidence, he just throws it there. He had the year off the year before because of that terrible injury that he sustained in the World Baseball Classic. That was brutal. So, maybe it took him a year to get some of the confidence back and to get fully healthy. Maybe a little bit of shakiness last year, but he is a top closer. He is an elite closer. I would put him in a top 3 closer in the majors. My confidence is high in that he can succeed in doing exactly that, which he's done in spurts for many times in his career.
Yeah, he has. The Mets capped off the offseason. They started off the offseason really with a big splash with Juan Soto. How does he hit in that ballpark? How many homers does he lose by going from Yankee Stadium to Citi Field?
I mean, Yankee Stadium has a pretty nice porch there. If I had to estimate without looking at my projections, I would say lose 7. But he had over 40 last year, and if he goes with 33, that's a great year. I mean, Soto is not there to hit homers, in my opinion. He's there to get on base, right? He's there to hit doubles. He's there to get things going, get base runners, provide protection for Lindor, and provide a reason to get Vientos in. And then you got Pete Alonso, who coming back, thank goodness, who can bring him in. So I'm not as concerned what his home run totals are going to be. But look, I mean, Francisco Lindor turned in a near 30, and he had 30 homer seasons 2 years in a row. I see no reason why Soto can't be in the low to mid 30s. I mean, the translation is like 6-7 from Yankee Stadium, if I had to estimate.
Yeah, and I think we both have him at 35 right now, so that makes sense. That's pretty close there as far as that goes. Pete Alonso is back. We were talking about this because the signing happened right after or right before I kind of booked you for co-hosting with me this week. Big addition back to get him back. You needed that extra power, that right-handed power for the Mets.
Yeah, I mean, to me, it's a big signing because he means a lot to the franchise. There aren't that many situations in life where you can say, wow, we've got a player who can be the all-time home run leader of a franchise. And Pete Alonso is just, I think, 27 homers away from being the all-time Mets home run leader. That's a big deal. That's a big deal to a franchise who is not known for their power. All right, the Mets have been known for pitching all the years, but not power. And to have a guy who can say that I'm here to crush things, I'm here to light up the home run apple, that's a big deal. Now, as far as fitting into the lineup, you don't sign Juan Soto without having the protection and having that presence, right? If they didn't sign him, you would have that gap. And yeah, Vientos can go over to first defensively, but who you're putting at third? Brett Beatty, that's a huge drop from Pete Alonso. Pete Alonso played every single 162 games and all playoff games last year. In fact, he played the most games of any Met in any season, playoffs included, last year. So he's reliable. He comes back from injury pretty well if he's ever out. Give you that presence, and at any point, he can smack it over. I mean, I still think 50 homers are in the upside. I wouldn't predict that. He did that once. Getting to 40 would be great again, but he does have that 50 homer upside, and maybe he's motivated. Maybe he's a guy that needs to be motivated. But it's huge. Having Alonso was absolutely huge. And by the way, that negotiation for him was incredible. I mean, basically, it's going to be a 1-year deal of $30 million, which is not much for getting one of the top guys in the market of power available.
Yeah, the Mets waited that out to their advantage, and because he turned down a much bigger offer earlier. And,
yeah.
That's gonna kind of stick with him a little bit there. So we'll see if what happens this next go around for him. Let's talk about some of the young hitters. 3 of them in particular: Mark Vientos, Francisco Alvarez, and Luis Angel Acuña. Vientos looks like he's locked into third base. Alvarez obviously behind the plate, and Acuña, is there a role for him?
Yeah, I think the Acuña, I think eventually he's going to probably dispel Jeff McNeil at second. Yep. I don't trust Jeff McNeil anymore. I know the squirrel is a nice meme there, and I know he once was a batting champion, but he's just looked worse and worse year after year. I hope, of course, he rebounds and he provides what he did, but I have less confidence in that. And Acuña is exciting. We saw he had a great first cup of coffee, if you will, in the majors when he subbed in for Lindor at the end of the season. He had a couple of homers. He got on base. He looked great and poised. And now he's got a great team to teach him. I think eventually he's going to be the second baseman, good fielder, goes right in there, and that's where he's going to fit in. He's going to be the everyday second baseman by the end of the year, I think. And even the manager said the Mets had an amazing day, and he said he's going to have a major role by the end of the season. And I think
huge role, even
huge role.
Huge.
Second base.
Yeah. Mark Vientos is locked into third base now with Alonso coming back, right?
Oh, absolutely. The Mets prefer actually not to move him to first because it's tough for a sophomore to learn a new position, right? You're first getting used to the majors. There's going to be some sort of a sophomore slump or sophomore regression as the league figures him out in a second year. So they don't want to do too many things at once, and so that's why they're glad that he's going to stay there. He was not the greatest fielder, but he wasn't, oh my God, terrible. He's passable. And the power is real. I mean, I think 30 homers is a very good floor for him. He can go 35. It's possible the Mets could have 4 players with 35 homers on the team. It's possible. It's almost like the Rockies from back in the mid 90s.
And Francisco Alvarez, he had a disappointing year last year, but I think the drop in power is perfectly explainable. He had a hand injury, and he
Oh,
came
yeah.
back and tried to play through it. And, I think we're talking about a 23-year-old who's shown legitimate power, good patience, above average patience. Now he's kind of firmly established as a major leaguer. I like him as a target this year at catcher.
Oh, he was a target for me last year, and exactly as you said, it was all injury related. Look at what he did in September. He hit 5 homers. You multiply that by by 6, and we're talking a potential 30 home run player. Can the Mets have 5 30 home run players? It's possible. No, he's a target. I've bought him in a couple leagues so far. He's just and projections are probably not even going to do him justice because they see the drop this
Yeah.
past year and the injury is not factored in correctly, right? And when you're doing projections, you're weighting the most current year the most.
Mhm.
To me, scrap that. I think that he is absolutely a buy and a target in leagues this year.
Yeah. And the thing is, projections for young players are always tough. I mean, you have to try to figure out the proper regression for minor league stats. You got to try to figure out how playing time is going to adjust and how and especially as a catcher trying to adjust to the major leagues, they go at their own rate. It's a little different than other positions too. So I always find those to be some of the toughest projections.
Yeah, catchers peak much later for offense than other positions.
Yep.
And the dude is so young. We forget because he's been in the majors the last 3 years. He is so young, and he's getting better defensively. He worked very hard this offseason on his defense. Pitchers love pitching to him. He just has the right encouragement. His framing is actually pretty decent, and his throwing at runners is not god awful. So he is. I'm not going to say he's a plus behind the plate, but people, the staff loves working with him. So I mean, he's just going to get better and better and cement himself as part of the team. He is really a cornerstone of the team. People think of all the other high profile players, but when you have a guy who probably is going to bat 8th for them, let's say, and he can have 30 home run power, wow. I mean, the Mets have this great potential this year.
Yeah, I think so too. Only spots like you alluded to McNeil. I'm wary of him, but Acuña is the ready replacement.
Yep.
Starling Marte is a little worrisome. Nimmo's injuries recently are a little worrisome, and I know they just re-signed Jesse Winker to kind of fill some of that gap. But if there's a weakness, it's like the 2 outfield spots in DH, in addition to the second base there. But how do you see that playing out? Is there a player there you're targeting among those? There's a player you're avoiding among those players besides McNeil?
Yeah, and the Mets also signed Jose Siri, who I think is going to have a bigger role than people think.
Mm-hmm.
He has one of those I'd say akin to the old Chris B. Young, who had 20 homers, 20 steals, and that's about it. If you remember what I'm talking
Yep.
about. And I say Chris B. Young because when you're doing player matching, there was Chris R. Young, the pitcher, so you always have to be careful. But so he's going to have the thing. Nimmo, I think, is still undervalued. He always every single year people don't draft him where he should be. He just gets on base. He has very high on base percentage and scores a lot of runs. And I think it depends on where he bats in the lineup.
Right.
Theoretically, he should be batting 1 or 2 because of his on base presence, but the Mets are not going to do that this year. So he might bat more 5th or 6th. That to me is the only possible drain of his value, where his run production, runs and RBIs won't be as good as they would be. But aside from that, I think that he's undervalued for his run production alone. And, he does do all the other things. He does get on base. He does hit homers. He's not a zero. McNeil is a definite don't draft. Starling Marte, the Mets are actually actively trying to trade him. They have to eat some money. They've even told Marte that we're looking to shop you around. He's going to be pretty much limited to a weak side platoon as the DH is what's going to happen with him.
Yeah. I was hoping maybe one less dead cat bounce, but that's looking less and less likely now. So we'll see. Any other prospects that we should keep an eye out this year for the Mets?
Depends. I mean, I'm not sure. It depends on the injury status of the pitchers, but Sproat is a very high upside play. He's actually been asked by a lot of teams, and the Mets have said no way. So he's a possible guy. The pitcher, I can't remember his name for a second, who's returning from Tommy John surgery, possible at the end of the season.
Oh, Christian Scott, maybe?
Christian Scott, that's it.
Yep.
Thank you. Not a play for redraft leagues, but if you're in a dynasty league, you probably will be able to get him cheap right now. That's probably a good upside play. In terms of the hitters, you've got Jet Williams, who is a fantastic defender at multiple positions. And what's his name? The outfielder. I keep thinking in my mind Logan Gilbert. It's not Gilbert. It's
not Bengi. He's not going to be ready. Oh, Drew Gilbert.
Drew Gilbert. I keep thinking Logan
yes.
Gilbert. Drew Gilbert. Yeah, he is close to Major League ready, and I think you could see him in the event that Nimmo has a sustained injury and is out for time. I think he would fit in very nicely, and the Mets would give him the first shot. So he is not somebody you're going to take right away, but as soon as you see a Nimmo injury, you might think to hit that button and pick up Drew Gilbert.
Yeah. All right. I like it. One last one. Ronnie Mauricio missed all of last year with an injury. Is there a chance that he comes back and like maybe second half contribution here?
Yeah, I'm not sure with him. People have asked me that question, and I just question the injury status with him.
Sure, of course.
I'm just not sure when or if he's going to come up and how productive. We have seen him when he comes up. He is productive, but he just sustained such a bad injury, and it's just been lingering, and different things have come up with him. Maybe I'd like to say that he could, but realistically, I'm not counting on that. So, people have asked me, hey, should I pick up Beatty or Mauricio?
Mm-hmm.
The answer for me right now is Beatty, because I just don't know what to do with Mauricio.
All right. Yeah, that makes sense. I think that's fair enough. All right. Congrats to Anna on your nomination for your podcast. What do you got coming up on that this week?
Well, we've already recorded a show that's going to be released this week with Derek Hardy. We're going to talk about the bat projections, and we're going through our positions. So we'll be doing outfielders. We'll also have Nick Pollock on the show, which will air probably early the following week, doing starting pitchers. Nick knows his stuff, so we're going to go through what ATC thinks, which usually disagrees with what Nick thinks. So it's going to be a pretty heated and fun episode. I'm looking forward to that.
Bringing out the big guns this draft season. I love it there. Awesome. Well, make sure you lock in on that. Get that wherever you find your podcasts. We'll make sure to check that out. Hey, Ariel, super fun. This hour goes by so fast. I really appreciate you coming on board, and best of luck this season. Thanks for coming on.
Thanks so much, Jeff, and thanks for having me. It was great to talk with you.
Always great to talk ball with Ariel Cohen. That's going to wrap up today's podcast. Big thanks to Fantrax and Edge Boost as well. Thank you guys for listening, and we'll be back at you again on Tuesday with Fred Zinke. Take care.